Vibrant music teaching.
Proven and practical
Tips, strategies,
and ideas
for music teachers.
You're listening to episode 71 of the Vibrant Music Teaching podcast. I'm Nicola Canton, and on the show today, I'm sharing my chat with Lyndel Kennedy about her creative approach to preschool piano. Hey there, beautiful teachers. This is the last interview I'm sharing from a series I did to prepare for the publication, the putting together of my new book, which is Playful Preschool Piano Teaching. You can grab that book at playfulpreschoolpiano.com. So last but definitely not least in this series is Lyndel Kennedy. Lyndel Kennedy lives in Perth, Australia with her husband and their 4 children. She believes in a world where everyone is created to be musical. Her programs have emerged from her rich music and visual arts career spanning graphic design, videography, photography, storytelling, and over 30 years of piano teaching. Her musical journey began as a young child and included opportunities to play at national level competitions, through to directing school musicals and choirs, attending composition masterclasses with conductor and screen composer Brian May, and conducting international teacher workshops. Lyndel is passionate about encouraging students and teachers wherever they are on their journey to express their own musical identity. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Lyndel Kennedy. So welcome, Lyndel. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Nicola. I've been looking forward to this all week. This is so cool. I can't wait to hang out with you. And, it's such a privilege because you're somebody who I totally respect, especially in this space of, education, music education for these really little ones. And I think it's so cool that you're having such an influence in that area. Probably it's one that traditionally hasn't been, taught extensively because of all sorts of different, things that people have taken as a presumption that they're not ready for it, it's too hard, blah, blah, blah. So I just love that you're really, inputting into this space. It's fantastic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd love it if you could tell our listeners just a little bit first about how you came to teaching and a bit about your background for those who don't know you, Lyndel.
Yeah, sure. So I'm thinking probably the best place to start is maybe what my first memory of being captivated by piano playing was. And I would have to say that first memory, which I didn't know was going to be so important, but in retrospect, how you can look back over your life and go, wow, I've carried this all through my life and now it's actually such a big part of who I am.
Yeah.
And that was that when little Australian kids grow up with watching Play School. So I don't know whether that goes far and abroad, but it's an ABC series of, then it's played during the school time hours, so it's for toddlers.
Mm-hmm.
And the presenters are just so natural and wonderful and musical, and there's lots of singing and it's very, very down to earth. But always when they were telling stories, there was this music being played spontaneously as they told stories. So they didn't necessarily read stories. They'd have puppets and they'd tell stories. And in the background, there'd be this piano music. And whoever it was, would just play, the teddy's walking up the stairs, and off this little piano sound would go until the teddy realised he forgot his pyjamas and had to run all the way down to the stairs. And it was just fantastic. And I used to listen to the music more than I listened to the story. And the thing that really bugged me from a really young age is they never showed who was playing this fantastic.
Right.
And I used to always think, one day they're going to show him. To my knowledge, they never did, although I did research it later because I was so fascinated as to whether they ever did. And I think I found one clip that had the piano man, and he was a guy I found out, on the side playing the music as they told their stories. So clearly years and years of watching Play School has led me developing my program, which is called Play a Story. So clearly there was something connecting there. So then I learned piano probably when I was about 7-ish, which was pretty common in the day, and from all sorts of methods and teachers, from the little old lady down the road that used a ruler across my knuckles whenever I played a wrong note. Hopefully that's not anyone's experience for a long time. I did a little bit of Suzuki, but I have to say the time that meant the most to me was in my early teens when I was learning in group classes with Yamaha. And I guess that was my foray into really becoming quite passionate about teaching, and it was because of my teacher, who was such a mentor figure in my life, plus a really great friend that we shared so much in our lives together. And so she used to do all these amazing, tours in Japan at all the festivals and stuff that Yamaha run. And while she was over there, she would just hand me her studio and just go, you know what we do, you know what all these kids are up to, because I used to hang out with her, during all of her lessons, so I kind of knew all the kids anyway. Yeah. And, she would just give me free rein. And so, that was probably my first introduction to teaching, and that's how it came about. That was when I was about 16.
Okay, so you're very, very much thrown in.
Yeah, very much. And I guess I loved that. I really found very comfortable. I guess it was sort of such an informal arrangement that I didn't feel that pressure and that need to be marked and scored, and had a great relationship with the parents of the kids because I was kind of always hanging about.
Fantastic. And at that stage, all of the students, I presume, were over 7s probably, was standard at the time. Yes. And still is in many studios. So when did you start to teach preschoolers? Was that much later on? Did you start bringing your own studio?
Yeah, well, so I started taking on students that Ronnie couldn't take on. And then developed my own studio. But as you said, you do what you know. Yeah. And unless somebody brings something new to the table, sometimes you're not even aware that it's possible. So I had, the general range of students from probably 7 to 17 type idea for many years, and used to teach, all the way through when I was, doing further education, and when I got married and had my first bubby, second bubby, third bubby. Now, when my first bubby sort of turned to about 4 or 5 years old, I really, of course, wanted to introduce him to the piano because it was part of my life and this would be awesome. And so I actually had his play group come one day, and I had a few keyboards around plus my piano that I was using to teach on. And so we used to all just sit around with keyboards that had different sounds. And I would just make up spontaneous stories because it was just a play group. It was just for fun. We used to make up spontaneous stories, and they'd all choose an instrument that was, the best one to describe the music. Hey, it was play school all over again. It's amazing how I keep going, wow, it just keeps going back to that. It's beautiful. I love that. And then sort of started developing this idea of making it more formal and coming up with actual stories that they could then repeat at home and find different ways to play it on the piano. And so it developed from there. So, that's how that happened.
Oh, fantastic. So basically you had your own child, looked at him and thought, he could play,
Yeah.
I did it the right way, That's awesome. So I think I know the answer to this, but our listeners won't know. So do you prefer to teach in groups, Lyndel, or one-on-one? And why do you prefer the format you prefer?
Right, good question. Do you know what? I actually love both. I really love both because I think, sometimes there's specific situations where I much prefer private, one-on-one. And there are specific situations where I'm going, oh my goodness, this is so cool to have a group. So maybe my default, my absolute favourite, and this is what I want most times, is sharing lessons. But it doesn't mean that one-on-one isn't valid and isn't something that I love. It's probably not something that I use on the whole. But I think both they're great situations. So in my private situations, most of the time I'm teaching students who perhaps find it difficult socially to be in a group. Maybe they're kids that haven't done kindy or haven't done daycare, where they're not used to a few people around them and having to fit into that space. And that doesn't mean that I won't get them in there eventually. So often when I'm teaching one-on-one in this one specific situation, I'm actually streaming them into saying, I have a group, and at some point we really would love to introduce, your child to this group. So I guess that's where I'm always going. And it's a matter of it being appropriate for it to happen. I'm very choosy with my groups that I put together because I want them to be great. I want them to last. I want them to, be the right mix, because then I've got longevity in my studio. That's a very good thing.
Yeah.
But the benefits of group lessons or even shared lessons, if it's just 2 or 3, I love to teach. I've taught a lot up to 6 in a group, and it's really super full on because I always have my parents in these young children's groups. Huge. I mean, it's a make or break. So you have a lot of people in a class if you've got 6 kids and 6 adults, but it works beautifully, and we've got a beautiful space for it. So it's totally workable. But what I love in the group is that, like, my energy level is off the page in a group. It's exciting. The kids are excited. The parents are laughing. We're throwing in smart little comments all the time. The kids are asking great questions that just absolutely, make me giggle at times. And so there's this amazing energy that comes from quite a few people contributing to the conversation. I love it because the responsibility isn't always on me to demonstrate ideas and take it to the next level, because I'm actually learning from my students in a group, actually privately as well, but in a group we're all learning from each other. We're inputting ideas all the time, and kids of this young age, they're not all inhibited like us adults become. They're like, oh, I did this and blah, 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 and other kids go, oh my goodness, I want to do that. That's so cool. So I just love that interactive energy that happens in a group. I think it's super important. I guess I'm a parent. I was a parent of very young children at some stage in my life. They're all grown up now. But as a parent, I just think the value you can give your child of just life skills, social skills, maintaining their attention when there are other things going on, knowing when not to interrupt and just take over the field conversation, knowing those social cues. I think that's incredibly important. Developing a personal responsibility about the space that we take up in a group situation. That's pretty amazing. Communicating effectively, resolving conflict. I mean, this is great. Dealing with personal boredom in a group. How do you do that? That happens, let's face it. Kids like going, oh, for the fairies. How many kids wander their eyes out my back window, up to the lights, or, and I record everything so they're cameras, and thankfully flip the screen so they can't see themselves. But, I can see kids doing this, and it's great for me because, I have techniques of getting them back. But they also have to learn, someone's talking to me, even though I'm in a group, I really need to maintain, my interest in this and stick with it for the long term. So, my goodness, groups are amazing for so many reasons. They really are. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, you had such a good experience with them yourself, it being your first positive experience with piano, really. So you can see why you're so passionate about them.
Yeah. That's so cool. That was a great start for me to start in group, because then teaching private's like, that's easy. Whereas maybe if I only taught privately, maybe I think it's probably a bigger leap to get your head around, wow, I've never learned in a group, I've never taught a group, how will I do that? Which is why, again, these spaces for us teachers to communicate with other teachers is so very cool. Internet's a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is. Okay, so just to clarify, are you saying that it's the same for one-on-one time For the half hour and group time, or just the same for every age of student?
Okay, so I have the same time allocated to my young children, the same time as my older children. I have the same time, in fact, for private or for group as well, because, you know, we all get through stuff really well in a half hour. And this way I don't have to make my lessons shorter or longer, depending on, particularly if you're talking groups. If one person leaves the group, you know, all of a sudden, do I have to make the lesson shorter? Or if an extra person comes in, do I have to make it longer all of a sudden because the number of the group's gone? So time-wise, I don't have any difference. I do charge differently for a private lesson as compared to a shared lesson. And I just have two prices. So if you're sharing with one other person even, so if there's two or more in a group, then there's a shared fee, which just makes it more accessible and actually more appealing. And because I love to teach a group, that's a really good thing. And you're paying a premium for me, for my sole undivided attention. But they're all half hour.
Yeah, and for the parent who has a child who maybe needs some private time, and you're saying we want to get them into the group, that's kind of an incentive for them, right? Because their fees are going to go down.
Exactly. And students that come in, you know, that I think, oh, I've got a group for you, but I need to really work with you. And I let them know I'm going to work intensively for maybe a term to give you a whole lot of background and foundational stuff that then we're just going to stream in at some point at which it's appropriate. And it might be a little bit longer than a term. It might be a little shorter than a term. It depends how we go. And I will definitely charge that as a private lesson. And then we move into, yay, we're group. That's awesome.
So I know teachers are always curious. So could you give us an idea, maybe percentage-wise, how much is your group lesson versus your private lesson?
Yeah, sure. My group is about 60% of my private lesson fee.
Okay, good. Yeah, I know people just always want to hear those ratios so that they can gauge it if they are going to incorporate groups and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's good practical information to kind of mull over. And of course, it's going to be different for everyone. It's not a, you know, it's not a one hat fits all, but yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So I see two beautiful pianos behind you there. It looks like one is maybe electric and one is acoustic.
That's my beautiful, beautiful, poetic European piano. And this is my fun Yamaha clap. I adore.
Awesome.
I love it.
So apart from the pianos, do you use any other stuff in your lessons? Is there any other equipment you find useful, and in particular find useful for the youngest students?
Yeah, sure. So I use the program that I've created called Play Story. And so we have devices. We are very device-oriented, and we have speakers. In fact, for my studio, my speakers come out of my clav because it's the most fantastic sound for music. But, you know, all my students are encouraged when they're at home to have their device on the piano and just have, you know, computer speakers next to the piano so that they're not just using the device. So, yes, speakers are really important because we use a lot of backing tracks and a lot of music where we're asking, how does the music make me feel? And as people listening to a tin pot thing like this, it's not going to drive
you don't feel anything.
You don't feel anything, exactly. Around you somewhat. So, yeah, speakers is super important in my studio. So just to give you a bit of background so that it makes sense when I show you what other things, other props I use, our program is very story-driven, which you've probably picked up by now, and the children have a story with an animated movie or an actual movie of the environment that belongs to the story. And each of the stories is divided into several scenes. So we have 3 journeys. One's in the forest, one's in the ocean, and one travels around the world. So it's pretty diverse. And as such, the emotional sound, the emotional connection to each scene needs to be different. And the best way to create an emotional connection is, wow, hello, by music. So we listen to a lot of orchestral music. That's like an emotional place card holder. So what I'm doing in my studio with these young children is I'm trying to develop their understanding of how does music make me feel Because if I can understand how it makes me feel, then I can understand how to play that story across the piano and express actually what I'm trying to express, rather than it just being a series of notes to tick that box. I did it. Now can we do the next scene? So in order to help them understand that emotional connection, because that's quite a difficult thing to do for a 3, 4, 5-year-old, 36-year-old often. We're not, especially in Australia, and especially if they're men, we're not used to being emotionally expressive. In very general terms. I think it's changing. So one of the things that I use, and I've just got them here, and they're just like something I made myself, so if you guys are into do it yourself, it's very cool because these can be expensive. But, you've seen these before. They're just, ribbon sticks, right?
Yeah.
But they're very, very, very expressive. So all I've done is get some doweling, right, and a little pin. Oh, you've probably all done this yourself anyway, and some ribbon, and just pop it in there and make sure it can spin around. So these are really cool in different colours. I have to say, maybe I do this for me because I think it's so glorious to see all these kids and parents playing ribbon sticks all over my studio. It's just yummy. That's definitely what I love. Is it necessary? Nah, not all. In fact, we don't really even use them very often, but they are so fun. But this kind of chat is good because it brings back a lot of the things I used to use, and I go, oh my goodness, I haven't used that for ages. I should get those out again. Obviously, percussive instruments I think are great. We talk a lot about the weather, in our player stories. If we just want to do maybe a spontaneous introduction, we look outside and go, oh my goodness, look how dark and cloudy it is. I wonder if it's going to, rain tonight. And so we're looking out, and so then I might get my students, the drum. Look, I should show you something that's super fun. Have a look at this.
Sure.
Hang on. So, we've got all the typical paraphernalia like the drums and the shakers and the cymbals and the triangles and all of that stuff, which totally whip up a storm. But I've got this thing, which I don't know if they've ever seen. I don't even know what it's called. Who knows? It's actually made by Remo, so brilliant. I must have got it from a shop. But what they do is they just do this thing and they just start twirling it. And
oh, yeah.
It makes how cool is that? So
That's awesome.
And so we do ensembles where we're watching our movie that we eventually are going to play to, and it's got, the mountains with the clouds being quite white and fluffy, and then it's a time lapse into the dark sounds of the thing. There's lightning. I edited fantastic lightning. I feel like, oh, what a great creator. And then there's rain and all these sort of things. So with all of these percussive instruments, the students are connecting sound to a feeling of what's going on in whatever way that is and whatever story that is that they're making for themselves. And so that's the focus, of my studio. Sometimes I'll use props like these little guys here. So talking about technique, which we might have a look at later, I'm not sure if you want to go there, but, one of the things that is a big feature in our program is the butterfly. She is everywhere. And so I have these little puppet fingers
beautiful
on their little middle fingers. And they are beautiful. So I don't know if you can see them, but they're gorgeous and they're very artistic, right? Now have a look at my hands. There's no aggressive movements. I don't even know how to describe it except for say, look at these butterflies, and that's all I have to do with my students. Look at these butterflies. Can you do that? And whether they need the puppets or not, this is our technique instruction.
Right.
And there's a few other things.
For those who are just listening, Lyndel has these beautiful finger puppets with butterfly wings that are really floaty butterfly wings. I'd imagine they're organza or something. So she's floating with her hands on these butterflies. And once you make the butterflies fly, then it's clear that's the motion that we're looking for, because they sort of float in the breeze, right? They don't force or push anything.
That's exactly.
To explain technique, yeah.
Yeah. And I find everything comes down to that. If I'm seeing some horrid technique happening, I'll usually just be able to, it just rolls off my tongue. Where are your butterfly hands? Where are your butterfly hands? Where's your butterfly gone? Can you bring the butterfly back? And it's instantaneous. They just go into this magnificent butterfly position. Their hands relax, their shoulders relax, they breathe again, and we're all good to go. Even when they're playing loud, thunderstormy pieces, I still want butterfly hands.
The butterfly is still there inside the storm.
Yes, and, things like, I'll explain it for your audio listeners, but, you've seen children play with their little fingers all scrunched up in a ball as if they're pointing. And they do it, kind of with any finger that can occur. And so I just go, can you let go your butterfly eggs, or your caterpillar eggs rather? Can you let go your caterpillar eggs and bring me back their butterfly wings? So out come the eggs, they drop them, and off we go. We've got butterfly wings already. So, things like that, everything relates to this absolutely gorgeous creation called the butterfly, who I think is beautiful. Even to the idea of, often you've seen students, they're playing like this, and then they're trying to find the note, and they flip their hand upside down to see the note underneath. I don't know whether you've ever had that, but I have. And so I, talk about, the butterfly colours, the wings of the colours are on the top, they're not underneath, and we don't want to turn her over because she's quite modest. She doesn't like to flip up to see what's underneath. So, everything can be related to a butterfly when they hang off the edge of the piano with their wrists way down. Why is your butterfly clinging for dear life to the keys? Make her please fly. And things like sinking into the keys for that beautiful pianistic and piano sound, that she's actually sitting, she's alighting onto the petals as she drinks the pollen. But what about those great big heavy sounds? We don't want to bang them. Well, that's when our butterfly actually changes amazingly into dragon wings. Because now we've got a very heavy butterfly, essentially. So, and of course the boys love that. So can we be dragon wings? Where are your dragon wings? When we're playing those big, mighty sounds. And we're still sinking where we're actually landing in the mud for the dragons. Of course that's where they land. And so they're landing and they're sinking, so that there is no sense of banging the keys or being stiff, or, it just doesn't happen if we can look at technique very, real, an image of this beautiful butterfly that gives us such a great go-to. So I use those. They've actually got all these great little characters here, which you can see. Now, I'm thinking most people who have got, little people in their world have got a ridiculous collection of all of these soft toys, which just keep coming. I actually use those not necessarily for technique, because I know I love the, some of the programs that use animals for techniques for doing different movements on the piano, pianistic movements. I think it's awesome. But I have to say the reason I use these, because I have my butterfly, she covers a lot of ground. I use these because sometimes, I'll be up to a certain place in the curriculum, and I have a student who's just disappeared for whatever reason, just isn't there mentally, emotionally. It happens, especially with these really young, precious kids. And so I have all of these on my shelf, and I just go, hey, go grab yourself a couple of little animals, bring them over to the piano. We'll pop them up across the top of the piano there, and let's tell their story. So, the animals will do different antics. I'll often have, especially if it's one-on-one, I have the parents sitting there up next to the piano, because obviously they need some sort of, emotional stability at that point, if it's really something that you're having to go off curriculum to give them a lesson. And the little creatures will say different things, and they'll have races, or they'll, eat popcorn, and then have their, eat, green spaghetti, and then they'll eat, whatever. You just make it up as you go along. But they love that, and that's a really cool kind of way to settle them down, bring them back to a place where there's relationship and trust and excitement and that sort of stuff. So that's a really important part of my studio that I do use quite a bit for those very young children. I have one 3-year-old who's very shy, and it works beautifully with her. So they're sort of the props that I use.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Nothing expensive besides the pianos, obviously, but everyone probably has those already. So yeah, just simple things that make a big difference to igniting a child's imagination and getting them involved in stories.
Yeah, that's it. Actually, there's another thing that I use that I've got this on my desk here. Probably a lot of people have got, those little xylophones, right? So I have one of those as well.
Oh, yeah.
I specifically use it because I like this. It's just a cardboard box. and little plastic mold. Now, I didn't make these, but oh my goodness, these are great because they get elevated as they go up.
Yeah, so they're the chime bars that are on steps for those listening, which you will have seen.
That's cool because to get a young person to understand that the vertical space of up and down is now a horizontal space of up and down, that is incredibly useful. And I probably only have to use it once or twice until I've got that up and down idea, but that's a great tool. Great tool.
Awesome. Yeah, great way to get that message across. So how do you plan your lessons, Lyndel, or do you just take it as it comes, or do you have a plan? And what about when the plan needs to be thrown out the window? What happens then?
Yeah, and it does, right? If we're all honest, it doesn't actually matter what age you're teaching. I find a good teacher is one who's, doesn't have a guilt complex over moving off a curriculum for a week or two, or just having another project that just clears the head a little bit. And with young children, that's super important because they are unpredictable in their moods, and also whatever's happened before the lesson, they're much more inclined to bring that into the lesson. So if they've had a hard day or they haven't had their afternoon nap or whatever it is, it's really going to happen. I had late napping children. All my children napped, even in preschool. So, yes, I do have a curriculum, and it's lesson plans, really super simple because we use the Play Story program, and each scene essentially is the next lesson. So we move through the scenes, which makes it super easy for teachers because we can just, we've just finished that scene. What's next? Oh, cool. We're in the pollen dance. This is the rescue scene. Yay, I love this one. And you just go straight into it. And because it's very explorative, which I think is essential for this young age group, then you're just exploring this idea with them. And, of course, we're laying down very sound theoretical concepts and technical skills that they're going to use for the rest of their lives, but it's under the radar of playing. So, it's important to say that. I'm not just throwing paint at the wall and see what it looks like. Really fun. Just saying. So we are teaching. So what we do is we teach a motif. And so for these really young children, there's huge benefits in that already because they're not learning a whole song that I don't know how long will that take to learn. Maybe over several weeks you could learn a whole song. A motif of 4 or 5 notes can be covered super fast, and then it's their job to improvise those notes across the piano. So that works. So that's my curriculum. But what happens when I need to move away from that? Well, one component in our program, which I just think is a really powerful component, is what we call Play My Story. And anyone can do this. So every week, in fact, so this is actually part of my lesson plan, but sometimes I'll spend the whole lesson on this if I have to leave my lesson plan alone, right. Where a student already, the ongoing task of every student in my studio that's doing Play a Story is to draw a picture at home and to have a story around that picture, so some elements that happen in that story. And then they assign a motif to each of those elements. When they then play it, they're actually playing the story around that picture. So it's a pretty simple concept. And they can, have that very complex or very simple depending on where they are up to in how much I've taught them about playing. But it's so good because it's a really connective thing to do with the student. The relationship you're building is amazing. So I had, case in point, last week I had 2 siblings. One's 3, one's 5, and they actually are learning separately because one started a lot earlier than the 3-year-old, and she's only just come on board. And they have been very shy students, my shyest that I have ever come across. Didn't know it was possible. Non-verbal, non-active, cuddling dad who brings them. They are adorable kids, but it was a lot of hard work, or not hard work, it was a lot of patience on my part. And I had to kind of almost leave not even a lot of my curriculum had to sit on the side a little bit but also my expectations had to kind of be set aside a bit, because I think sometimes we work off our own agenda, which pushes our lesson plan, which doesn't always work. So having this play my story in the background is just, it's amazing. So it was so funny because you mentioned that we were going to do this interview before I had this lesson, and I kind of thought, well, you know, one of those questions that might come up is, you know, what do you do when you have a non-responsive child who's 3? What do you do? You just sit there. Well, I always have my parents there, so I've always got some sort of help if I need it, which is good. But I had this terrible lesson last week with both of these kids. They just went into abandonment of me. They didn't love me anymore. Like, it was really, I had to try not to take it personally. It was very tough. And I knew I had this interview with you this week, and I'm going, oh my goodness, it's like I was the worst teacher I've ever been in my life in that moment, because I just kind of almost let go. It was so perplexing. I've had it in, you know, students who have been tricky in those young age groups, but not for the entire lesson, like absolutely zip. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. And so yesterday they came back for their next lesson. I was surprised they turned up. But I just thought in my head, okay, the biggest thing I can offer these kids is a trusting relationship that says, I don't judge you, and I'm going to keep moving forward in a way that really grows you as a person and respects you as a person. So with that thought, the little 3-year-old had drawn this picture of dogs. Actually not drawn, she cut out a magazine. There were 9 dogs, all separate pictures, and all the dogs dressed completely differently, had their own personalities, which I was very grateful for, because there's only so many barks you can do across the piano. What am I going to do? So we pointed at them all. We decided we would name them all, because I just wanted her talking to me. And in the very least, please just talk to me. So we named all the dogs, and, you know, some of them had a beautiful pink fur collar, and another dog had this sort of vest with stripes on it, and so he was called Racer, and the little one with the pink, she was called Princess, and there was a Curly, of course, and there was a Scruffy, of course, and so they all got their names, and this little girl barked on the piano for each of them, but it all sounded the same, and I thought, nah, we're going to get a little bit more inventive here. So I said to her, well, if your dog was Racer and I was my own dog, what would happen to Racer on the piano? And of course you know what she's going to do. She races across the piano. Of course, that's what you do. All right, now we've got Curly, and so she knows the chromatics, so you know it's like. So we're talking the story, and she's doing lots of chromatics, and I'm duetting, because I try and duet with everything they do, to create that emotional space. And, you know, Princess, oh my goodness, well, she was just adorable. So we had this great player story for every personality of 9 dogs. Well, when we got to the race one and we had 10 minutes left in the lesson, I thought, okay, so I need some sort of theoretical component, because I always teach theoretical concepts with pretty much everything that I do. And she hadn't learnt the word pianissimo or fortissimo, so for loud and soft. So we decided to pull the race dog back into the story, and I asked her to do a racing dog where everyone was cheering really loudly in the background. So, oh my goodness, I mean, we had the greatest race ever. Of course, she won. But she got off the stool, and with her dad, they're jumping around and we're making all this noise, and it was super fantastic. And then I sat her down and I said, now, what about a quiet race? Because, you know, we want pianissimo. And of course, teaching her these fantastic words that took her a while to get into her mouth, but once she got it, you should have seen her beaming. I mean, what an achievement. So we had this tiny tiptoe race, and I'm going, I don't even know of a race that exists that you actually tiptoe. What am I going to do? I thought, egg and spoon race, of course. So her dad and her pretended they had a little egg on their spoon, and so their project this week is to go home and actually have an egg and spoon race. And to do the egg and spoon race on the piano, and to do the racer dog with the great cheering, and to learn fortissimo and pianissimo. So who could have asked for a better lesson? She had interaction, she had expectation where, yes, I expected her to talk to me, and I was working on the basis that she would, and that she would laugh, and that she would smile, and that she would talk and add things, that she would discover beautiful music on the piano, and that she would walk away with new knowledge. And all of that happened off the lesson, away from the lesson plan. I guess the benefit is that our program is so principled in the way that it teaches to teach, that it becomes second nature. And, I've taught Play My Story in every lesson for the last 10 years. So it's so instinctive, and it's instinctive for my students, not because they've taught it, but because they are in that space of living in a story world. They use their imaginations all the time. You let them.
Fantastic. It's a great concept. And I think you said you had a sample of a Play My Story that we could share with people.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a little student that I have. She's been learning probably 12 months, I would say. Look, she's a little bit older. She's 6, so is she in preschool or grade 1?
It's different in every country anyway, so don't worry.
So she's about 6, just turned 6. And she, in this little clip, while this idea of drawing a story and having motifs attached to it and a little story, her mum writes a little story on the page so that I can read it, because obviously the story is the prompter to keep the improvisation moving.
Yeah.
And what she was particularly working on, and what was her triumphant moment on this particular lesson that I recorded that we're going to show you, is that she learned to weave each of the motifs seamlessly into the next one. Up till that point, it had been, oh, look, the magical key was like a rainbow, and she'd play her rainbow and stop. And I go, oh, next sentence, the magical key did la, 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 la. And she'd go, oh, that was that motif. And so it didn't feel like a song. So we'd worked on this the week before the recording and said, what I want you to do is take those motifs and make it like a song, where everything moves into the music, doesn't stop. And, what she did was beautiful. You could still very much see the distinctions between each musical idea and concept, but you can see her thinking all the time, oh, she's not bringing the next sentence in, so I should just keep going with this motif until she does, because I was reading the story. So it's a very exciting development in her space, moving to that next level of individual components in a story to a flow of music that a story also shares. So, I think that you'll love this clip.
Okay, so we have got some magical keys. Which is your favourite key? Oh, I love that one too. How did you draw these keys? Because they're all so perfect.
Just one I didn't really trace it. So I didn't
yes. And these happen to be magical keys. Now, do you want to read the story while you play, or do you want me to read the story while you play?
I want you to read the story.
Oh, okay. All right, let's do it that way then. Okay, are you ready? Mm-hmm. All right. These are magical keys. Magical bubbles. And these magical bubbles keep them very, very safe. And they sparkle with rainbow colours. Sabina. Oh, that was such a great story. Well done. My goodness, maybe that's the most fun you've had with finding different motifs and putting them all together in a story. I tell you what, you've got this. This is very cool. What you're really doing is making up a whole song using your imagination and some ideas to go with it. That's so great. Well done. High five you. Woohoo!
Great. What a fantastic example. It's so great to see these things in action. It's why I often share clips of my own teaching as well, because it's a different thing to talk about than to actually see a real student like, oh, this is what it would really look like if I had a kid in front of me.
Exactly, and I love that you do that, Nicola. I've seen you do that a couple of times on your website or your Facebook group. I can't remember where I got it there, but it doesn't even have to be long. It's just that little moment of, oh, okay, now I can see. It's like kind of putting flesh on the bones of teaching a concept. It's a great idea.
Beautiful. So I love that example of basically the practice assignment for your 3-year-old last week being to play the egg and spoon race. Both on the piano and off the piano with real eggs and real spoons.
Yeah.
So what kind of practice do you expect in general, and does it vary by age, and is it always as creative and imaginative as that?
Yes, it's always creative and imaginative. But it doesn't even have to be. Like, the idea is that playing the piano is such a creative and imaginative thing. No matter what you're doing, whether you're playing repertoire, whether you're playing, improvisation, whether you're composing, it is such a creative instrument. So you don't even need those other things in the background. Just playing the piano, if you're using that idea of it being complete artistry and you're creating something beautiful, then that's where you want the students. So my very young students, maybe they'll practice one scene per day. So maybe they've got 5 scenes in their playlist that we've gotten up to. If they have got 5 scenes, I want them to at least play one of those scenes. Now, a scene, okay, so they play their video. Every video is 2 minutes long. So it's not a long time, but actually when you're playing and making up music, it feels quite long because, you're working pretty hard. A 2-minute song is a really long song normally. But because they're working on playing this little motif and changing it around and moving it around the piano, 2 minutes disappears really fast. So for my very young students, they might sit at the piano and review for a couple of minutes with their mum or their home coach, I call them. What's the motif for heart song? Oh, well, then it's the A minor, and you break it up. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now, for 2 minutes, you're going to play that. Now, you might... So whether they play it that intricately, but they're actually changing that one A minor motif with the add 2 in there, all over the piano, up and down, flipping it backwards, just moving 2 parts, all sorts of things for 2 minutes, and that might be a practice. And then maybe the next day I'll say to the coach, so, like this is what I would be saying to a coach. The next day, choose a different scene that we've already worked on. Get that one on the piano because you want their fingers on the piano. And if it's a 5-minute practice, fantastic. That is so much better than sitting there getting to the tears point at saying, well, it's not half an hour yet. Oh, the oven timer hasn't gone off. Oh, the old oven timer. I used to do mine by the oven timer. Mum said, I don't mind what you do. Just sit at the piano for half an hour. It's on there. And you know what? I hated boredom. So, of course, I would play. It was much better than just sitting there. But sometimes I go, really? That's so cool, right? I can just sit here. Eventually I go, oh, my goodness, this is so boring. I need to actually do something. I'll play the piano.
Nothing else around.
Yeah.
Well, of course, that's not going to work if you're talking about a teen who has a phone in their pocket these days. So they definitely are not going to use that as the solution for their boredom. But yeah, I so agree with you. Just get them to the piano. That's always what I say to new parents, and especially when they're at such a young age. Just getting them to the piano every day. That's it. Whatever they play, that's fine. That's their practice for the day. Hopefully it's something from my list, but hey, if it's not,
Well, if it's not, it's in my case, if it's not, like the way I look at it, if it's not, it's actually playing something from their own imagination. And oh wow, I actually think that's probably better. Fantastic. go for it. So, yeah, I love it. And they will naturally incorporate the new learning into what they're doing. It just naturally happens. It's what we do when we learn.
So true. So you've talked mostly about the Play a Story program, which is obviously improv. At what stage would you be getting students towards reading, and how would you approach that? Is that much later age, or where does that fit in for you?
I really like my students, if they're very young, to be working purely piano-based for, I'm going to say 12 months, just understanding how their fingers are moving on the piano, having the freedom to play very complex music that I wouldn't dare show them what that would have looked like if I'd have recorded it into a writing software program.
Right, yeah.
Unbelievably, complex. So I love to have my students for 12 months before we move into reading and writing, or actually repertoire. But come repertoire, I'm a huge fan of teaching by rote with the music in front of us.
Okay.
So I love, and so I'm developing a program at the moment that introduces repertoire in a very simple form that I'm teaching by rote, but I have the music in front of me. And I am actually referring mostly to the contours. So they're just learning the contours, and as far as rhythm goes, they're using their ears. And, of course, we're tapping and we're clapping and we're on our knees and we're miming and all of that stuff. So that's, the rhythm part is in their bodies and listening to the tune as they get to know it. But watching the contours of music's super cool. And then what happens is that, they might get quite a few songs in that repertoire, and then we go back and all of those repertoire pieces are with extra notes filled in, so that at any point, whether my student is, 4 at this stage or 5 at this stage and coming into that first repertoire zone, they're looking at music that's simple enough for me to, put a little pencil along and follow along and say, look, that goes up, blah, 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 blah. If I have a student who's maybe 7 or 8 and maybe has already done some repertoire or even done some reading, because we have another one called Score a Story, which is a reading composition program. If they've done that, they're ready to jump in to moving through the more complex arrangements of those pieces. Right. So that's a really cool way to teach reading and repertoire in a kind of hybrid situation. So I don't know, I'm experimenting with that at the moment and getting some amazing results. And then the final progress of that is actually seeing those pieces written in every single key, so that they're truly reading every time they play and getting used to mapping the scale out or the picture out on the piano. So, there's no end, is there, to how far we can take students if we're doing it incrementally, step by step, at a developmentally appropriate stage. So that's why I defer the reading, because I think it needs to wait until we've really established a great relationship with the piano first.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And one of the things that I love most about starting students really young at 3 or 4 years old is that you have the luxury of time. So if you start a student at age 10, you're pretty stuck, because that student is going to expect it to look kind of like their peers who maybe have already been learning for several years. And you have to push these things forward, and you have to start reading pretty early on, or, you're going to be stuck and the parents are going to say, what are you doing? But if they start at age 3, you've got all this time. You've got 7 years before they're 10,
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great point, Nicola. Awesome. I totally agree.
So listening is obviously core to what you're doing, and you've talked about movement and clapping. I'm wondering whether you ever sing in your studio. Do you use the voice to explore these stories?
Yeah, great question. Gosh, I would have to say that while they're playing Play a Story, a lot of our motifs are harmony driven. A lot of them are chords that are put together, maybe broken up, but they're still very much based on a chordal concept, because I think the keyboard is essentially a fantastic place to learn about chords, because it's so visual. So it's very difficult to voice harmonies. You can't do it. The other thing is that with improvisation, it's very difficult to voice improvisation because you're not learning a particular song that then you can sing. You're playing as you go, and it's hard for your voice to go, oh, I know where you were going there. So as far as the improvisation part, they probably don't voice as much as they do as when they're, learning repertoire, for example, where you can actually have a melody that you sing along with. Having said that, because Play Story is so chord-based, they are learning straight off the bat. I think about the third scene is developing C, F, and G chords, and about the fifth scene they're adding A minor and D minor. So we've got a lot of equipment there to be able to play accompaniment. So if they're playing Twinkle Twinkle, they could just have a basic accompaniment pattern underneath, but singing the voice. So twinkle twinkle little star, and they keep going along. So they're getting that vocal singing, which is so important as human beings to sing. And the other thing is, before they start even knowing those chords, I'll play these songs on the piano and they're all singing in the background with the parents. I have this fantastic choir happening. So, that becomes a part of the lesson. That's sort of one of those off-curriculum things that I love to add as well, if we need to sort of get some wriggles out, especially in a
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've given us so much insight into your lessons and your playful and story-based approach to teaching, which I love. I would love it if you could just give us some final words of wisdom. If you have any tips for maybe thinking back to when you first started teaching these young students, what, for a teacher who's never taught the 3 to 5 year old group before, what are some tips you might give them, and what are some mistakes that you might tell them to maybe avoid?
Yeah, right. You know what, I've kind of said it already, but I think that with these very young children, if you're fixated on your own agenda of ticking the boxes of a set curriculum, or not even a set curriculum, but your expectations.
Your idea, yeah.
You're going to get anxious because these young children don't develop that way. They're not little robots that you can just program and plug in and add the next level when you need to, because they need to be progressing. On the same point, you need to communicate that to your parents, because often they have no idea. They're just conditioned by, maybe they've got older siblings in school and they're on a tick-the-box curriculum because that's how schools operate. I'm not sure if that's best, but there it is. And so they're going to reflect that. Yeah, they're going to reflect that on beautiful children who actually should be just exploring their world, in my opinion. So that would be the biggest thing I would say, is don't feel that you have to stick with an agenda because your parents, parents of your kids expect it, or if you expect it. Having said that, we can't just play around. They're paying good money. We can't just play around and hope we're going to hit some buttons somewhere. It's not a child-centred curriculum that I'm asking you to, consider. Use curriculum as your basis and then weave other things in that support that when needed. So that whole idea that I was talking about. A lot of people also have said to me in the past, oh, it's so great that you can teach group and really little kids because you've got the personality that goes with that, but my personality is not yours. I'm nothing like you. I'm quite shy and I'm quite this and I'm quite that. And they set this idea up that teaching young children even is something that some people can do and some people can't do. And I just think, just be open to the idea. They're just human beings that we can interact with and talk with, and you don't have to turn into a child to be able to relate to a child. Not at all. You can have your own personality of all of the complexities of life that you've been given and be able to still relate to a young child because you actually were there once. Maybe you have your own children, but, maybe you don't, and maybe that's the barrier that says, oh, I can't do it because I don't have children and I'm not natural at it. I would say if there's a need for teaching young children in your area and you're giving away students because you don't feel you have the personality for it, I'm just going to say let these children teach you. Let them be your teachers. They will open you up. They will melt your heart. They will teach you to be creative in your own personality space. You don't have to be anybody else, nobody else. Be your own self. Everyone else is taken. Your spot is there for you to be to that child what they need from you, and allow them to develop you as a teacher of young children. I learn from my students all the time. My best lessons are from my students. Yeah.
No, I so agree with you. Some of my best lessons have been from my youngest students, especially, because you just have no choice but to learn about where they are and go to them. And that can teach you as a teacher, what you need to do for that in your own style. As you're saying, it's not that you have to be like Lyndel or that you have to be like me. We're both already different. You've got two very different examples. You be you and do it your way. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that frees us up to take the pressure off us, because we don't have to apologise for who we are ever. We are so beautifully unique, and we have a voice that needs to be heard amongst our little children. We have to give them the gift of us and how we teach. It's wonderful.
Beautiful. What a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me for this, Lyndel. It was wonderful to hear how you bring all of these imaginative ideas to your youngest students. Tell us where we can find out about you and play a story.
Yeah, so fantastic. You can jump onto our website, which is innermusician.com. So that's INNER musician.com. And that will take you to our play a story curriculum. You can have a little scoot through there. Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. It was super fun just spending this time with you.
Well, that's it for our interview series all about preschool piano teaching. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back to our regular solo shows where I talk about something that's important to me and try to help you through your teaching struggles and inspire you to try new things in your teaching next week. You can pick up the book at playfulpreschoolpiano.com if you don't have it already. And if you're a member, you can see the video version of this interview in the video library. So if you're not a member, sign up at vmt.ninja to get access. And if you're a member, just jump on over to the video library. You can see Lyndel as she talks about those beautiful butterflies. So I think this is a great one to watch. That's it for this week. I'll catch you next Monday for another episode of the Vibrant Music Teaching Podcast. If you are enjoying the Vibrant Music Teaching Podcast, you might like to check out our paid community at vibrantmusicteaching.com. This is the perfect place to level up your teaching, get inspiration, new printables, and full courses and lesson plans to use in your music teaching studio. Find out more and sign up at vibrantmusicteaching.com.